Let's see if we're live. And I think we're just about to go live. Are we live? Yes, we are. That's
Okay,
great.
cool.
Okay, so always a nerve-wracking moment. This bit,
Yeah.
Pierrick. It's amazing to have you here, man. Thank you so much for joining me. For those that haven't watched it yet, I had a really amazing chat with Pierrick a few weeks back
It was great.
on his channel. He does amazing work. He's really talented, but yet humble. He does some of the best, if not the best, courses out there. Amazing
That's true.
trailers, makes you really want to like get to learn more. And he's an amazing animator, and he kind of thinks outside the box. And ever since we talked and I found your channel, I've been really curious to know actually talk more about your career, what inspires you, your journey, and all this good stuff. So thank you so much for joining us, Peric. Awesome to
Thank
have you
you
here.
so much for having me. That's super cool.
Yeah.
Kind of intimidating. That's easier to ask
You
the
think?
question, I guess. Yeah.
You're gonna be fine. Like it's really
Yeah.
cool to see people like yourself. Because what I was thinking about it the other day, and I was just mentioning this to my wife the other day, is that I think people like yourself, even like people like all the Keith Langos of the world and all these people that have been like teaching animators around the world for like just for the sake of actually teaching others on how to do things better. You can tell that when people are passionate about it, or when people are doing it just because they want to be popular or they want to make money. And it's very clear in your work that you do it because you really care for people to learn whatever you're teaching as best as possible, right? So it's very cool to me to see how entertaining you make it, how professional you make it. Yeah, and it must take a lot of time.
Yeah, I can confirm that. I'm trying to wrap up my new course. It's been more than a year in the making. I'm burnt out,
Oh my
but
God.
I'm getting closer and closer to the goal line. So yeah, I was supposed to release it like a couple of weeks ago initially. Then
Amazing.
I was like, maybe for Black Friday, but I believe it's gonna be Christmas in best case scenario,
Yeah.
maybe early January. Yeah.
But if it is
It,
Christmas, it's going to be a massive gift for many people, I'm sure.
yeah, that's the idea.
All right.
That will be great.
That would be amazing. So
But uh,
yeah, no, like, and by the way, anybody in the chat, feel free to actually drop your questions as usual. I'm pretty sure we're going to have a lot of fans from Pierrick because Pierric's channel is like at least more than double than mine. So lots of fans from Pierric's work, which is really cool. But also feel free to send questions because the whole thing about this interviews is for you guys to be able to interact with us and send us questions. So Pierrick can answer them live. I can answer them live. And we're going to have a lot of fun. Now, Pierrick, I always like to start to from the very beginning, right? Perique, the little child, the teenager, the person that actually like was very big fan of either animation or being a 3D generalist, falling in love with 3D. How did the whole thing started? Like your journey in general.
so I was born in the countryside, loving family, everything super nice, and I was introduced to video games super early on for a guy of my generation. I just turned 42 yesterday.
Oh
Hey,
yeah,
yeah.
welcome to the club. Welcome to the club.
And my parents used to work for a company that will build rockets to go to the moon and stuff like
Really?
that. Like
Wow,
yeah, to put satellites on orbit and things like that.
that's amazing.
Formerly called the SEP. So they did believe in computers super early on.
Mhm.
So we had a PC when I was 7 years old. It was really something at the time. And the first game I played was the very first King Quest in four colors, a
Okay.
CGA at the time. And you had to type in prompt to make the character do whatever.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've been like into games super early on. As a kid, I would draw all the time. But then when I got like in my, let's say, higher studies, I didn't really know what to do. I was playing a lot of game. I was drawing, but drawing wasn't something I would like tackle as a potential professional career. And when I got my degree, and when you are supposed to choose in which university you'd like to learn, in France,
Hmm.
basically, my mother had the great idea to ask me what I wanted to do. Because I wanted to be a teacher at first, and I do believe that some of the things that I'm doing right now, basically.
Yeah.
Um, but you know, the studies to be a teacher, they are very like university like. You know, you have to read books and be super serious about it. And I wasn't like a super student. I have a twin sister that is super smart and was super good at studies. I was kind of the black sheep, you know, in the in the family, the guy that draws well, but he's not
Yeah.
that that
It's
made for
Pierrick.
studies,
It's
basically.
Pierrick. Like
Yeah,
it's
yeah, yeah. He's gonna be fine, you know. But so basically, she put, when she asked me, I was, you know, like pushing the toward things that would work at the time, like computer development and stuff like that, without believing in it. And she was like, "But you draw all the time and
mm-hmm.
whatnot. You should do something about this." So I was, "Oh yeah, maybe um, we'll make up for cinema, something like that, you know."
Hmm. Hmm.
So we searched for schools, but they were like super far, super expensive. And she was like, "Maybe you could find something like really focused on drawing." And we got to a school where you could visit the school at the time, you know.
Yep.
I don't know how you will call it in English, but basically the school is open for potential students to visit it and see
Like for a
what's
day
the,
tour. Yeah.
yeah. And I kind of, I mean, it was editorial design and commercial design and graphic design, basically. But it was like you draw and you get a job about it, you know. And it was pretty new for
Hmm.
me to see something like that, you know. For me, artists were like people struggling and starving, basically. So
Yeah.
you would see like real professional getting to that school.
Yeah.
So I was like, yeah, I want to do this. And as soon as I started like doing that, I completely changed.
Good.
I will I will start to work like day and night. We had like classes from Monday to Saturday, and I would work at night. I was like completely transformed,
It's
basically,
like you
because
found your purpose, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I talk a lot about my mother because she pushed my brother, my sister, and I to do whatever we wanted.
Hmm. That's great.
But you, yeah, that's like one of the best luck you can have in
Of
your
course.
in your life is to have
Yeah.
like supportive parents,
Hmm.
but also parent that helps you opening your eyes. I do believe, unfortunately, that when you're 14 to 18, it's kind of hard to know what you want to do in life. And in France, at least, you're supposed to choose your path when you're 14. But when you're 14, you don't know anything about
Of
life, you know.
course.
You don't know what kind of job you want to do and this kind of stuff. So
Yeah.
even though she could meet someone that is 40, 50, and she will ask, what do you want to do in your life?
Of course.
And what don't you change,
Yeah.
you know? So I stuck to that, and my studies were pretty good, but I mostly became like really a man of work. I would work like really a lot. And then out of school, after like 4 years, 4 to 5 years of studies, I struggled to find a first job, as
Yeah.
you did. Because
Yeah.
whatever they say in school, when you're out of school, for companies, you don't have that much value. Basically, it's very hard to get a first job as an artist.
Agree, agree. It happens a lot here in Europe. I don't know if it's the same thing in the US, but there's a lot of when you're going to university or anything like that, like it's almost like companies don't take you seriously.
Yeah,
Here in the UK, it's slightly different. I feel like if you go to Oxford or one of those big universities, then yes, 100% you're
yeah,
ready
yeah,
and it's great. But at least I remember when in Portugal, at least whenever you go to university and you finish a university course, it does not guarantee you getting a job. And most companies
yeah.
just think of you as a bit of a joke. You're like, he's trying, but he needs a few more years in the oven before he's ready for a job.
Yeah, and the reality is that whenever you start your first job, like in 1 year, you learn so much compared to your 5 years of studies.
Hmm.
What I like to say, and what I believe is important with studies, is to learn, basically.
Yeah,
I mean, for me, studies is like you discover what you like. It may help you choosing a path,
hmm,
but then you must learn to learn, because when you start to work, self improvement will make the difference,
yeah,
basically.
yeah, yeah,
So you need to enjoy what you do. That's super important. And I do know that most people can't choose their job, or they take the first job they find because they need to pay their bills and whatnot. But
yeah.
if you have the chance to choose whatever you do, you
Hmm.
got to do it for real, and you got to try to improve yourself every day. And it's about learning. It's not about being the best. You can be better than the others, but the fact that you learn fast will allow you to adapt to any company or any workflow or
Agree,
whatever.
agree, agree.
And I think this flexibility helped me a lot, basically, during my career, whatever I was doing.
Yeah.
So I struggled for about, I was kind of jobless for 9 months or
Hmm.
so, doing, like little design stuff, but it wasn't really paying anything. And I got through an internship that was generally for people that were under 18. I was like 23 already, because that was the only way for me to get into the first company I worked with.
Yeah.
It was a printing factory, and I was doing both graphic design and printing pre-production for them before
Wow.
it goes into the engines and stuff.
Yeah.
So before that, during my studies, I worked with they are called the Gens Spécial now, and it was like a collective of artists, basically. Now they were doing street art and stuff like that. They got a very successful career. I was kind of the serious guy, the one that was doing all the computer stuff, taking the meetings with the officials and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And there were the artists, but we had like a real artist life. But as soon as I started working in the company, it was no longer a thing for me, like waking up at noon and doing art till 5 a.m,
Yeah.
drinking and doing stuff.
Became a job, right?
Yeah. But so it wasn't my thing. I needed to be like in a professional environment. So this is why I switched to that company. It wasn't for long, but it was super interesting because I was doing a lot of things, graphic design. I was also doing fashion design. Um, and at some point, like very quickly, the company will go into bankruptcy, not because of me, but it was like that. And I was more into production. In the end, I was like working on big printers and
Yeah.
stuff like that. So the more I got into my jobs, the further away I was getting from art. But I was enjoying it because there was always a challenge. And when I got in the first kind of big company I worked with, my very first serious job, um, my office was empty.
Right.
There was like a printer in a box, in a card box, some kind of gear or engine to produce stickers, but very specific stickers. And we were doing business gifts
Business
at
gifts.
the time.
Okay.
Yeah, USB flash drive. When having like
That
8
sounds like
megabyte.
the most. I'm guessing it must be exciting in the beginning, but then maybe not so much after, or how was it?
Yeah, so it's more or less what happened. So
Right.
basically, when I arrived there, we were the first to do that in Europe, and we were the fastest. Like every product will come from China
Mhm.
and were printed in China. We will do that here in France in a couple of days, and it will be delivered instead of waiting for 3 months to the goods to arrive by boat at the
Right. Of
time.
course. Makes sense.
Shipping goods by plane wasn't a thing
Yeah.
at the time. And the company I worked in developed the flight shipping system of DHL.
Oh, I see.
Like we were one of the first like doing quick deliveries from China and
That's
stuff, and
great.
what we know today with Amazons and stuff like that,
Yeah.
we were part of the first companies to use that system. So the thing is that we were using like laser engraving, silk printing, a lot of different method and everything. Um, and I had to deal with 40 people selling stuff, and I was
Yeah.
alone. So
Okay.
that was always a challenge.
That
That
like
was the challenge.
that to me it tells me like, so what I try to do a lot of the time with these interviews is like seeing the connections between the person that you are now with the things that happened before, because as you know, like we all go through experiences, but the experiences normally culminate. Sometimes they feel disconnected, the things that you go through life, but at some point it starts to make sense. And to
Yeah,
me, it feels very much like that experience taught you not only how to be professional, but also how to actually kind of like market the product, perhaps, and kind of sell a product in a very nice way that is presentable and all that stuff. So I'm seeing correlations there. Am I correct? So is this?
that was part of it because I was working with a guy that was specialized in that, making good product presentation. But the biggest lesson I got from this was to create pipelines.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, we were like creating photorealistic renders, but without 3D and rendering at the time of the
Right.
product with the customers' logos on it.
Mm-hmm.
While it wasn't a thing we were very like popular because of this, because when people would present the product, it was like super cool,
Right.
and everything was scripted and automated from the moment the commercial would exchange with the customer, send the files and the way we would treat the file, and then print it, etc. So
Yep.
it was such a big technical challenge for years.
Mm.
And after 6 years doing that, both the printing part and the fact that we would have to make those products looks well,
Mm-hmm.
we were a little more into product development. So and marketing basically. So
Right.
I was kind of influenced by that, but also the fact that it was a big open space. So I was working with people selling stuff all day long. So
Right.
you hear some strategies.
Yep.
And the thing is that my manager, my direct manager at the time, he was and still is a real model in the way you have to behave
Oh,
with
nice.
people and with your colleagues
Like,
and with your job,
and with your
you
job,
know. Mm.
within the team or also outside the team, meeting customers and things like that?
Yeah, both.
Both, right? Okay.
It was really good at negotiating and stuff like that. I was very uncomfortable with that at first.
Mm-hmm.
And at so, he did something, I hated him for that for a short period of time. He pushed me to negotiate something with a supplier, pretending they did a mistake. They didn't.
Oh, I see.
But he told me they did a mistake. You have to negotiate something.
Okay.
And I was like fighting with him. I didn't want to do that
Of course.
because to me it was unfair.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Because I was taking it personally
yeah.
because I had like almost friendly relationship with my suppliers,
Mm-hmm.
and it taught me a couple of lessons. Beware of friends when you are doing business,
Yeah,
basically, and try. You
yeah,
can try, you know. If at
exactly.
some point the guy say, "Hey, you're cheating on us," you're
Of
trying
course.
to,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
okay, fine, but
Yeah,
just try,
absolutely.
So it really, this experience really pushed me on toward the business side of things,
Mm-hmm.
and how to kind of understand it at a very low level, but still. But yeah, really, it was to have a big amount of things to do and how to reduce the workload basically by automating as
Many things as
many things
possible.
as possible.
That is so cool.
And yeah,
That is really,
that
really
was
cool. See,
a cool
like
experience.
I find it fascinating because I'm a big believer of everything happens for a reason. And when anything happens in my life, no matter how small or how big, when I don't understand it, because there's things that happen in your life. Like, for example, I'm sure when you had that job, you were wondering, I want to be an artist. What am I doing here? Printing things all the time, right? But at the same time, like that experience has been incredibly valuable for your present now as an
Yeah,
artist, right?
yeah,
And I think that that is something incredibly valuable for anybody like looking out there, because I used to think that I was in shit jobs before, when I was in London growing up and like through working and all these other things. And genuinely, every day of my life was spent daydreaming about when I'm going to become an artist. It's going to be amazing. And I never truly understood how valuable those life lessons were and how much of a difference that made to the person that I am nowadays. So, really cool to hear yours because I never imagined, I fully thought that you actually went to university and at some point you got a job as a 3D artist, as in like, being, in the industry somewhere, film or games or something like that. But no, it was a roundabout way in a way, right?
Yeah, yeah, it was a pretty long path. What also pushed me away is that when I was, I believe, 10 or 11, I had a greater brother. He's 3 years older than me, and we had 3DS. At the time, it wasn't even 3DS Max. I think it was on Windows 3 point something.
Oh, I see.
And when I saw him like trying to model a cube in 3ds Max, I was like, wow, 3D, like
It's
it's
amazing.
something.
Oh,
No, it's way too complicated.
it felt complicated to you?
Yeah, it
Oh
was
yeah,
in
no.
English. You had to type in the coordinates of each vertex to make them
To make
appear. It was crashing all the time. And
yeah,
I was like, I knew maybe
yeah,
100 words in English. I was like, so it kind of, yeah, dragged me away from this.
yeah.
And then, being like kind of successful with Illustrator and Photoshop and being good at it. I was
Yeah.
challenging my colleague, like I was the fastest and stuff. And
Mm,
I was always in that, in this like healthy competition. It was a
of
game
course.
between us. I
Yeah,
wasn't like here to, I don't know, trample anyone or whatever.
of course.
And what happens when you say that maybe it becomes boring at some point is that toward the end, after 6 years, I believe there, we started to make very like custom shaped USB flash drive. Like
Mm,
your logo becomes a USB flash drive.
nice.
So it will go through a 3D pipeline. It was made in China, and we will receive renders. The first renders were really like old school 3D, really not so
Yeah.
beautiful. But at some point, they had like some ray tracing stuff, and I was like, wow, that's photorealistic.
Mm.
That's incredible. I was like, how do you do that? What software are you using? So they said we are using McNeil Rhinoceros. I don't know if you know this
Rhino.
software.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely not artist friendly, I would
No.
say, but
But
it's NURBS modeling. So
I'm guessing there must have been like, was it like early 2000s?
uh, 13 years ago
13 years ago? Yeah, yeah. So
or
you
14 years ago, something like that.
yeah, exactly. Because there was a point in time that there was lots of companies trying to create 3D softwares, like there was Alias Wavefront that had Maya, and then Autodesk had 3D Max and Motion Builder and all that stuff, and there was so many doing different things, and there was always like a thing that the software did better than everybody else, right? Like Cinema 4D now, which was back in the day. It was like a very old software. It was all about the rendering. You can actually get all these
Yeah,
textures and stuff. So every software was good at doing something better than the other all the time. And I remember perfectly that nobody was bigger than Autodesk even at that point. But yeah, you actually always, it's almost like getting a new phone nowadays. It's like, what's next? What's the new software? What's the new
yeah, yeah,
company?
yeah.
It's not the case nowadays, but Rhino was one of those softwares that just came and went, right?
Yeah, I think Shades was kind of popular at the time. But Rhino, it was a great product, but it was really like to make industrial visualization and the industrial modeling. Basically, you will
Right,
model something that will be production ready, and
right.
some, I don't know, machine will be able to read those files.
Yeah.
So it was very technical. I I think I got through more than 1,000 pages of you know tutorials and stuff. Like I got obsessed.
Right.
New thing, 3D. Wow! For a
Amazing.
year, I will grind this, and it was also the time where mobile games, started to be popular.
Hmm.
And with a couple of friends, we wanted to try something, and we were doing it like in traditional 2D or in vector 2D with Illustrator, but I would animate as if it was on paper, basically.
Yeah.
And they were like, maybe if you made it in 3D, that will be a little faster to animate and create more version and stuff like that.
Hmm.
But I was like, yeah, but Rhino is absolutely not made for this. I should learn another software. And basically, the gamble or the choose was having Blender for free or cracking Maya. But I was at an age where cracking softwares,
Yeah,
when it's your job, I was, nah, I don't want to crack a software anymore. I
absolutely.
have like licenses for everything. I understand when you, I mean, I don't want to promote pirating or stuff like
Yeah,
that, but even Adobe, when we were young, they were okay with students to crack the product because they knew that those students would learn their software and then use it professionally and buy the licenses.
yeah.
It has changed thanks to subscription. It's now more affordable, I guess.
Hmm.
Um, but at the time, that was my thought basically.
Yeah.
So I jumped onto Blender, and same thing, got completely hooked, obsessed. I'm a guy of obsessions. So whenever I
Like
like
most
something,
artists are.
yeah. So yeah, so basically yeah, I was like reading books and taking as many tutorials as possible. And the thing that was great at the time, I believe I was kind of born in the right time to do that because there wasn't that much tutorials and stuff. So
Hmm.
you would have time to learn the core principle of everything.
Yeah.
When I was in graphic design, I first started in a traditional printing factory. They were making films and stuff like that by hand.
Right.
So there were like elder people telling me this is how it works physically. And if you screw on the computer because you have all your masks and stuff, but you can't see if there's a color, out of the thing,
Yeah.
that will screw whatever we're printing.
Yeah.
So you kind of get a little deeper in those fundamentals, and I feel like it has been something like super important in my career and where I'm at now
Hmm.
basically. I'm not the best animator, the best rigger, the best whatever, but I kind of know how blenders and 3 in general kind of work.
Which is
And
great.
so,
Which
yeah,
is really
you
good.
adapt.
Exactly, because like that was going to be one of my questions for you because we get a lot. And by the way, we're getting great questions from the chat. Thank you very much. We'll
Okay.
definitely address those ASAP. Please keep on coming. And hello to everybody that's just joined us. It's been a really good chat. But I was going to ask you about being a 3D generalist because like we get a lot of questions here about like what if I don't want to be just an animator, what if I actually want to do it all, or if I have different interests, because it's very difficult. Animation is difficult for a lot of people. One of the factors is that you have to focus your attention to this one discipline for years to come in order to become any good. And only when you actually kind of spend years practicing, that's when you start on your journey. And unless you absolutely love it, obviously it's difficult for you to kind of like
Yeah.
keep at it. So I don't blame anybody that just wants to do a little bit of everything, because after all, you perhaps want to like maybe not only animate a character but also model a character but also render a character but also get cloths in physics and things like that, and all those things are fun. So I absolutely understand that. So my question to you was exactly that, like, do you feel as a 3D generalist that you can find job work more easily, mainly because you come as one package? Pierrick Picaut comes as one package that can do it all.
It's hard to say because right now I'm known for my animation and rigging skills, basically, and for teaching.
Hmm.
And I do believe that it allowed me to land my latest job, basically.
Yeah,
But at the time, I will learn everything because I was just hyped
of
by it. I
course.
didn't have any like professional goals, and I was bored at my company the last 2 years. Everything was easy, every process was already settled.
Mm.
I had the great privilege to move to foreign countries to settle some workshop and stuff
Hmm.
so that people would produce directly there. So I was more and more leaning toward 3D, and as soon as I felt comfortable as a generalist, I just left.
Hmm.
I had enough money to um, sustain for a year, and I told myself, you have a year to make a living out of it.
Nice.
the great thing about being a generalist is that you can find, as a freelancer, I believe you can find a lot of pretty um, sustainable and profitable projects.
Hmm.
What I did at the time, I had like a couple of customers from the company I was working in, but it was like for less than €1,000 at the time,
Right.
like those 2 gigs, and that was it.
Yeah.
But I was able to answer customers that wanted to do like short commercials,
There you go.
corporate commercials. It wasn't things you would see on TV or whatever, but I would go there and say, I will do everything
Yep.
from
Exactly.
scratch.
Which is great.
And this is what's great about being a generalist is that you can have this kind of opportunities.
Yep.
Lower budget, but everything is for you. And the cool thing about that, because I did work with other studios or with other artists,
Hmm.
you don't wait for anybody, and it's profitable because even though it's a small budget, everything is for you. You don't have to search for concept artists or to wait for someone else.
Yeah.
So there's job everywhere. Now the thing is that, and this is where sometimes I don't know where to position myself in the discourse.
Hmm.
If you want to work for the industry, a lot of people will tell you you have to specialize,
Yeah.
which is true. If you want to work at Blizzard, at Riot, or whatever,
Yeah.
I believe any studio upon 50%, you have to be a specialist.
Yeah. You do. Yeah.
But when I entered Atypic Studio like 7 years ago, I was able to do everything. They contacted me to rig and animate,
Hmm.
but then I did environment, character modeling, VFX, and stuff like that, a bit of everything.
Yeah.
So it helped me to find a job to be a generalist and to
Exactly.
grow in that company.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Which is beautiful because I think this just shows that there is not only one path to actually get
Yeah.
into this industry because like for example, I had the opposite of what you had, Pierrick. So I actually worked in the industry for so long and I specialized in so for so long
Mm.
that at some point I was kind of fed up with the job that I had at the moment and I'm like, I'm gonna go freelance, right? I have all these years of experience animating, so I'm gonna go freelance. And all the gigs that I was getting, they were like, cool, we need an animator. Awesome. But what companies think of an animator is that you rig, you model, and you animate. So you do the
Mm.
whole thing and you get a
Yeah.
character to move around and do the thing and all that stuff. Don't worry, we have people that can render. Don't worry that we have people that can actually do other things, but we need an animator. But then it was me telling them I can only animate, but I need somebody else to do the modeling and the rigging for me. So that basically means that when it comes to freelancing, you become cornered into this very specialized type of freelancing. So this is when I finally understood the appeal and the value of being a 3D generalist because I had a friend of mine, because this gig was for this theme park, a friend of mine that was an animator but was a bit of a generalist. He actually worked with me previously and he could actually animate and model in rig. So he actually kind of like got me out of a bend because he told me like, don't worry, there's enough animation for the both of us. I'll do the rigging and the modeling, and then we can just share the animation between
Yeah.
the two of us. So I have the utmost respect for anybody that wants to be a 3D generalist because I do know that there's work out there for them. And it
Yeah.
might be the path, as Eric mentioned, that a path for you to then specialize on something later, if you actually decide to go that route.
But the thing is that I mean, when you have conversation with all the artists, there's like all stories are kind of the same, but they are not the same. There's always like some bumps or some
That's always
things in
hard.
the life that put you on that track or in this
Exactly.
job, and you're like, oh, okay, I will embrace video games. Basically, for me,
Absolutely.
it was working at Atypic Studio. I was in the end, like so again, it was super challenging and super interesting to work as a freelance because I worked a lot for the pharmaceutical companies,
Hmm.
so you will learn a lot about medical stuff. And when you're like in 3D at first and you want to learn everything, you got to study a lot of stuff. And so it was interesting to get to know people working or like surgeons, people like that, and talking to them like super high skilled specialists,
Of
talking about
course.
everything,
Yeah.
that was super exciting. But and what I want to say also about that is that we often think about jobs in our industry focusing on big AAA studio
Yeah.
for video games, or thinking about Disney, Pixar, Sony, or whatever. But that's maybe, I don't know, 5% of the
It's
industry.
very small.
I
Yeah.
mean, I did half of my career being a freelance working for company you will never heard about, and I was
Exactly.
doing very good.
Yeah.
Basically, I had a cool life. So,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I think that sometimes people get so like kind of like caught up on that idea that is this one studio or this one place or is
mm,
nothing, that they end up not actually then doing nothing with their career because nothing is ever good enough. But I do think that if you open your mind a little bit and you actually kind of like try other things and just get a job, get paid, be an
yeah,
artist, that's enough. At least to me in the beginning, like just being an artist is good enough. Like if I can earn money by not actually having to scrub floors or washing dishes, that's already a plus. And that's basically where the whole thing starts because like I think the best thing that you are doing, and I started doing a few years ago as well, is the fact that when you work for yourself as a freelance and you are actually getting paid with clients and all that stuff, unlike somebody that works in a AAA studio and is working for an employer, you have no ceiling about how many clients you can get. Literally as much work as you can do is as much money as you can earn. And that is very liberating. And sometimes I've worked with many people in the industry that they never know how that feels because they just went from university straight to working for a AAA studio. And they're so used to working for somebody that working by themselves or for themselves becomes almost like paralyzing, right? It's too much. Like what happens if, and then there's a bunch of different things that comes after that
yeah,
sentence.
yeah, yeah. That the relief for me is to have like 1 year of saves. That really
Yeah.
helped. But within 1 month, I was ready. Like
Yeah.
after I think 2 months, I was making as much money, or I don't know as much, but as in my previous job,
Yeah.
basically. So I was like, okay, that's a win.
That's it.
And then there's when you do it on your own, when you're making your money on your own, there's another level of satisfaction too.
Absolutely.
It's like right now I'm running a business with P2 design. It's pretty successful, and whenever I get call from, it happens that studios want to recruit me.
Yeah.
That's always super humbling. And I'm like, this is my rate. I don't want to move
Yeah.
because, I have my own business. I will make more money than what you will offer me.
Exactly.
And your project doesn't, like, I'm not super excited about it. So
Yeah.
that's my truth, basically. I get
Yeah.
more satisfaction, like having my own business, and having a success with that working for other people and
Absolutely.
meeting success with those people.
Yeah.
Now, what I do miss is working with a team. And this, like, when I was in my first job, I was the funny guy. I was probably the most grumpy guy when I was working, but as soon as my job was done, I will go see everyone, just,
Nice.
making silly jokes and
Yeah.
doing that stuff. And at Atypic Studio, it was a bit the same. I was like really grinding it, but as soon as I was more free, let's say, I
Yeah.
will just call people and ask if they were okay and stuff. And I do believe this really helped me beyond the fact that I knew a little bit of everything. That really helps to talk to people, especially specialists, having the same vocabulary, and that's
Mhm.
super important if you want to, I believe, direct something. You don't have to be the best, but you need to know a bit of everything to know how people work and what are their struggle and how to communicate between people that doesn't communicate, like
Agree.
artist and technical artist or
Technical,
whatever,
yeah,
something.
engineers and things like
Yeah,
that. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that if you were to actually start your career just at home and then be successful just at home and never have a team and just have the sense of independence by yourself, then becomes very difficult for you to then manage a team and can get
yeah,
everybody to work together and deal with grumpy days from other people. As I'm sure your boss had to deal with you, right?
yeah,
Things like
probably.
that actually make you a better leader, a better person, a better director, whatever you decide to be next, right?
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And yeah, and so yeah, for so basically, what I wanted to say is that I started with Noara as I almost refused the gig. I was like, guys, independent studio, like it happens all the time. You have like independent studios with absolutely no money, and they are telling you that they will pay you once the project is a
Yeah.
success or whatever.
Yeah.
And I was another independent studio, but they were paying upfront. They were paying pretty well.
Yeah.
It wasn't great, but it was cool. And when I saw the concept art, I was like, wow, that's cool. I will do something. They would pay me per character, per animation. It was like super easy to quote
Hmm.
and say, okay, if I do like 3 animation a day, that's gonna be a good day with a good paycheck.
Yep.
So I had like this put aside. It won't be a money problem. And the project was looking good. So I got into video games that way, basically.
Nice one.
Just doing a gig for a small game,
Yep.
and then it becomes bigger and bigger, and oh, we're missing environment, okay, we'll do the environment, and then oh, we have a little more money, oh, maybe we should recruit someone to do the
To do the
environment or
environments
do the
instead.
characters. So I will teach them our pipelines, our small pipeline, but mostly how to use Blender, because we were using Blender,
Yep.
and a bit about the company and stuff. And in the end, I don't know. I think at the best, I had like maybe 12 people working with me.
Hmm.
I had up to 4 animators. And what was super rewarding was they were all my animators. And I will teach them like in a couple of days how to use Blender. And in 3 days, they were up for production.
Nice.
And that was super satisfying to see like skilled animators getting into Blender and
Yeah.
saying, "Well, that's not so bad," and doing like great animations and being
See,
happy using the software.
that's the process that I need to go through, Pierrick.
Yeah,
I still haven't had the time, but that's the process that I have to go through because I actually like respect Blender and the Blender community. I know you guys are super together in the way that you are kind of like rally together, which is amazing. But
yeah,
I
it's
haven't
awesome.
really had the time to test it yet. And then some people think that I'm a my only kind of guy, but it's genuinely because I've been using it for the longest. I'm most comfortable, and
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
about it. The professional industry uses it quite a bit, so this is why Maya for me. But I am so curious about Blender. So as soon as I have a bit of a spare time, 100%, I'll be taking your course, so I can actually
yeah.
get to learn how to actually get this Blender thing going.
Black Friday is coming.
Black Friday's coming. I'm taking that offer. I'm taking that offer. Amazing, Pierre. Yeah, thank you so much for the chat so far. There's a bunch of different questions here from everybody. Thank you very much, everybody that is here with us. So I think there's a question here. Let me just look at here. Um, so Tails Tome, apologies if I'm butchering your name, Tails, or Talis maybe, is asking me. He's about to have an interview for a rigging position at a major game company. Do you have any valuable tips for someone looking to stand out in this field?
um, that's complicated. So far, what I felt is that when people will ask me to rig, like I worked a bit for Rovio, I'm now working for Amazon Games.
Hmm.
And I was like, oh, I won't have the level, like those are big companies and whatnot.
Hmm.
Don't underestimate yourself. Be humble and whatever. Just ask what they want. Be honest, basically. But most of the rigging is not that complicated when you know the basic stuff. Rigging Complex riggings are just a bunch of simple things, one on top of the other.
Mhm.
So if you know how to build from scratch, and that's very important because using auto rig solution is not rigging. It's it's too basic. You need to know how rigging works. If you have like some of this knowledge, you should be able to answer their needs.
Mhm.
And also don't be afraid to fail at first. Uh, they will know, I guess, unless you're the only rigger in the company. But if they have other riggers, you will probably learn from them. And if it's a really big company and they are interested in you, is that they spotted something already that you may not know, I guess. So be
Absolutely.
confident.
Absolutely. I don't have a background in rigging, so I cannot give you tips specific for rigging. But what Pierrick mentioned about being hired by a company, like that's really important to know that you were hired for a reason. Like there's a lot of people that start in the company and they have a big imposter syndrome, because they think that why did they hire me? I'm not as good as these other guys, and I keep being told that my work is not great and things like that. But in reality, you should look at it almost like Rocky, or any any movie that came out there that people actually get told off a lot, but eventually they became a champion. That's how you should look at yourself, because most likely in anything artistic, whenever they hire you is because they see something that you don't see yourself just yet, because you too, maybe too green or something like that. But if you keep at it, you eventually you'll get there, and when you look back, you'll be like, this is why they hired me, and you'll know why it will happen.
And the people you will work with and you will look up to, they weren't born knowing all that stuff. They
Yeah.
just learned it. So if you have the opportunity to get in those jobs, be scared, but just go for it because you will learn so much, especially in big studios. If you're surrounded by other artists, it's super like stimulating. So you should take it as a chance basically. So go for it. Don't be scared. And if you fail, it doesn't matter. Next year you will find another job, or maybe sooner than that.
Yeah.
Get to go for it.
Absolutely. So, Talis or Tails asks as well about like relocation. If he actually gets the job, any advice when it comes to relocation? I think everybody that has experience has a lot to say about this.
So it's complicated, and I didn't embrace this path. Basically, I bought a house a couple of years ago in the countryside because I'm a freelancer working from home and having my own business. And I thought that would be satisfying enough, but the thing is, working by yourself, that's satisfying, but you want to go back into a team. And when you are in a team, you want to go back and work for yourself. I guess that's being human. So to me, relocating right now is very complicated because I made a choice as a lifestyle. But if it was like 10 years ago and I had the same proposal I had a few months ago to move into Montreal for like a great position in a great company, I would move. It's just think about what you have right now. If you're renting an apartment, or even if you own an apartment, if you're not engaged with anyone, or if this one is not the right person, ask yourself the right questions, because I do believe you will regret not to move um, when you're young, because the older you get, the more complicated it becomes
Hmm.
because of responsibilities and stuff like that, or life choices. But if you have the chance to be relocated, even though you're not someone that is comfortable with traveling or whatever, do it because you will meet people from all around the world.
Hmm.
And that's super, as a human being, that's an incredible experience. And you will get even better as an artist or whatever, because that's a thing I like to repeat. We are recruiting people. When you meet people from other culture, other background, it helps you taking a step back on your situation and on anything you may know in your life. You know, You're more relative whenever you hear stories or whenever you want to complain about your situation.
Hmm.
So if you have this, I mean, if I had this opportunity, I would move, you know. And some companies, so I'm not very familiar with what they can do exactly, but help you to relocate. So
Yeah.
if it's the case, just go for it. But if you don't have right now a job, basically, I don't think changing country nowadays is, at least for me, a good move. You can make your portfolio and you can be someone online basically, and then when you land the job, it's now the time to choose whether or not you want to accept and move into the studio. But I wouldn't move right now to California to find a job in the gaming industry. I don't think it makes sense. It's more, do I have the level to work in one of those companies? Am I willing to move if they recruit me? Yes or no? That's the questions, I
Yeah.
guess.
Great answer, Pierrick. I think, like, as somebody that has moved quite a bit around the world because of exactly the same reasons as Pierrick has mentioned, it really makes you grow as a person, like, so much. Like, I cannot stress that enough because of exactly what Pierrick was saying. Like, you meet new cultures, new people, you judge less, you learn more. There is like different artists of different skills, and the bigger the company, the more you're actually going to be surrounded by super talented people. And what he does as well is actually gives you a realistic ceiling of where the max is for anything that you want to do. So if you want to be a rigger or an animator or whatever, and you move forward to a AAA company that does the best, like a Blizzard or like, a Naughty Dog or whatever, you get to see how the riggers that are at top notch are doing the work at their level and what it needs to be for you to actually get there, right? Like what's the level that you need to actually get to aspire to. And that's very important because if you actually are in a bubble in your office in your country in the same place and you don't move about, then it means that you're actually blind to all those things because you're working behind your desk all the time. So it's definitely a good thing, but as Pierre has mentioned, the older you are, the more difficult it becomes. And when you have responsibilities, then actually this new world after COVID is super amazing for people like myself. I have a family, I have a wife, and I have kids, and I cannot move anymore. So all of a sudden the opportunities have opened up now, where before, and 10 years ago, I would have to move to another country to have more opportunities. And that is the beauty of it, because you can choose. Before you couldn't. For years, my friends and I were talking all the time about, like, I mean, you spend the whole day behind the computer working. Why can I not do this at home? It would be the same thing. And there was always this sense that we could do this at home, but it's just that the world was not ready for it. The world is ready for it now. And the best thing about it is that if you're talented, you can do it from anywhere in the world.
Mm.
So it means that the talent is not just in Europe or just in the US. The talent now is everywhere. So it's just really, really amazing. So you guys have choices. I'm so jealous of the young animators of nowadays, Pierrick, because they get to choose now. It's amazing.
So that, yeah, that's a big chance. Now, I do believe that if you have the chance, especially early on, to move into a studio, that's for the best, because working with people, with real people in real life, like in a shared office, you will work a little less because you will discuss more, but you will be way more inspired, basically,
Exactly.
and you will, the little tips you learn just upon the shoulder of someone, on someone
Mhm.
that comes, oh, you should do that, try this shortcut, or try this method, or I will animate this way, push that pose and stuff. You won't have that through your daily meeting online where you show your work, you have feedbacks, and you move along. So, yeah, whatever, working from home, that's absolutely awesome. But as a young artist, at least, and I believe like in a whole career, if you can have shared time, work from home as much as possible, but sometime go to the studio, meet people, that's also where you get inspired and you learn,
Yeah.
I believe too. But yeah, definitely working from home made a huge difference.
Oh, it's
Right now,
huge.
I'm working with people in Montreal right now,
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, 5 years ago, that would be very complicated.
Yeah, absolutely. Like
So,
even the tech that you use nowadays would not
yeah,
actually be able to use back then. Just one more thing that actually came to mind as Pierrick was answering is that the impact that you can have on other people in person is much bigger than online. And that's the thing that I've seen the most because I was lucky enough to be able to bounce from studio to studio and meet a bunch of different people. And thankfully, because of that, now YouTube as well, like people recommend me for jobs because they work with me and they know of me and they know how I work and how I do things. But most of it, especially the most experienced people, is because we worked together in a studio and we had a coffee, we had a conversation. Turns out, we liked each other and we became friends and things like that. So the industry is so small inside, the industry is so small that people start bouncing all around in different studios. So whenever they need somebody that is really good, like, we need a good rigger. I know Pierrick. Pierrick is going to be great. Let's bring Pierrick over, right? So those are the kind of things that happen when you are in person. It happens also online. This is why we're having this chat with Pierrick right now, because we had the chat before and we're really gelled. So now we're here again. But it's much better when you do it in person and it's much more lasting. It lasts. The impression is it's much more stronger in person, if that
yeah,
makes sense.
yeah, definitely. And yeah, that's a very small industry, definitely, because I got to work for many big studios, but indirectly they will use my tutorials on my courses and then maybe ask for small workshop or
Mm,
stuff like that. But there's always like a blender head in those studios that is like pushing people toward, my stuff, and it allows me to get to know some
it's
people.
great.
And the job I have now basically was the guy from Rovio. I did a workshop for a few hours about rigging for their company, and he moved to Amazon Games,
See?
and he talked about me basically. So
Yeah,
when they're contacting me, I was like, why me?
exactly.
I wasn't searching, applying anywhere. And they were like, "Hey, would you like to join us?" And I was, yeah, I was like, why not? But they wanted me to be the animation director. I was like, are you serious? Why
Yeah,
me?
that's amazing.
How how do you know me? And so they give me a few explanation about it, even though I and we discussed already about this together, but I don't really understand why they made me this proposal.
Yeah.
uh, but still, so now I started working with them like
How long has it been?
4 months,
4 months.
3 months maybe. Yeah, it's pretty recent, I would say, as an animator in the
Yeah,
R&D department. But I do a bit of rigging, animation, a bit,
a bit of
like
everything.
slowly a bit of everything. And
Yeah.
uh, I think there's something to do with them in that regard. I made some proposal, but I'm only working 1 day a week for the time being.
Right.
They've been like super flexible about this. They're like, take the time you want to finish your course, basically,
Perfect.
and then we want you as much as possible. So I was like, it's going to be 3 days a week maximum. They were like, okay, it's it's
Yeah.
it's okay for
But
us. So yeah.
But when we talked about this, and I have a question for you about your work as animation director, because it's always fascinating to see people going to different roles and having different responsibilities. But I think a lot of the reason, as we talked about behind the scenes, about them asking you to be an animation director, is a lot to do with with your YouTube channel, right?
Mm,
Because I'm always surprised about how people actually perceive you because you have a YouTube channel. They feel like you are the right person because you have certain traits. They can see your personality. They can see how you actually try to teach other people, how compassionate you are, how patient you are. All of these things, I think, are skills that are very noticeable in your channel. So obviously, it makes complete sense for you to have to be the animation director so you can do the same thing but inside the studio. Does that feel all right? Does that feel like it was the
yeah,
reason?
maybe, I don't know, and I think it's a little too soon for me to ask them, like, honestly, why.
Yeah.
uh, Especially since my position right now is just being an animator or a tech animator, more or
Mhm.
less, because we're still searching, and
Early.
so I'm
Early.
rigging, I'm animating in Blender. in a triple A studio.
Aha. It's so it starts. It's so it starts.
And I was like, maybe I could teach some of your animators how to use Blender. If you want,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
can do
yeah.
the rigs, And they were like, oh, okay, we'll think about it. That's just a small parenthesis, even though that's a big studio, and I was r- not necessarily willing to work in a big company like Blizzard or Riot, even though those were like the studio that would make me dream when I was a kid. And I have like tons of story about that
Yeah.
because I was afraid to become a number in such a big company and do one task or
You
have a
would.
very small team.
Yeah, you would. You would be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And while here it's like, I don't know how many people are working on the game I'm working on, but we're like 3 or 4 animators for the time being,
Hmm.
and I mean in the animation department because like there's a guy that is more of a rigger,
Right.
there's a more tech artist and stuff like that, and we are experimenting. Everybody can be heard and stuff. So it's really like
That's
my
great.
previous job in Nora. Yeah,
Feels
that's
like a
super
small indie
cool.
development, right?
Yeah,
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
and I have like a very special. I don't know. I always lean toward smaller companies because you do more things and you're more important.
Yep. Agree. Agree.
At least that's my belief.
Yeah, you have a bigger saying, right? Because there's less people, there's more work to do, so you get to actually have more ideas and do more of it, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, makes sense.
yeah. That I think that's what like kept me in Noara for 5 years, even though it was kind of hard in the end, because you will do a lot of different things.
Of course.
Um, if I was in the same situation financially wise or whatever and doing only animations
Yeah,
without, having any sense of direction or, like being able to choose, I would have quit like way earlier,
of
I'm sure.
course. Of course. Yeah.
So yeah, that having a bit of freedom is like to me super important.
Yeah.
But I do believe it's also a part of my path since I have my own company.
Yeah.
If something is too boring or I feel like I'm not enjoying the job anymore, I'm like, hey, why? Why are you staying there?
And
So that's a chance.
yeah, exactly, and that's why it's an amazing thing for you to actually like venture out on your own, right? Because then
Mm,
you actually start having choices, and the more success you have, the more choices you can have. It's not like you can actually go to the 9 to 5 and maybe you hate your boss, but you still need to be there next day because otherwise you don't get a
yeah,
paycheck, and there's no way out. And sometimes you have that feeling of being cornered, and like I wish I could change my job, but you can't. I think that is not something that you have to actually like worry about anymore because of the success you've been having and all of this working for yourself situation, right?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's a great balance too because if I got into a job where, for example, for Nora, at some point I would animate for a year
Mm.
nonstop every day. And so I was missing sculpting or rendering or whatever, but I
Right.
could do it for the YouTube channel,
Oh, I
or I
see.
could do it, as personal project or
Of
as a
course.
potential course or stuff like that. So having like this P2 design company really helped me, like for the last, I would say 7 years, balancing my frustration.
Yeah.
I did some like anime style animation with hand-drawn VFX.
Yeah.
I mean, like in production, if I would do that in production, I would be like very bad because I was very slow
Of
and
course.
whatnot. That's not my job, but
Yeah.
it was super pleasant to do. So I was fulfilled artistically, and then I could return to a more sustainable or profitable job,
Yeah.
on the
Exactly.
side. So that's a big chance for
Super
sure.
cool. Super cool. One more question from the chat. Peter or Peter is asking, as a 3D generalist, have you ever felt like you were spreading yourself too thin? And if so, how do you go about having that balance of all these skills?
I still have this feeling because when I rig like a lot, I want to draw.
Mm.
When I draw, I want to learn scripting. When it's always like that.
Yeah.
So when I was freelancing, my go-to was if I know how to do 80% of the project right now, I will take it. And the 20% I don't know, I will learn them along the way. That was my philosophy basically.
Mm.
So I never really felt like, oh, this is too big for me, or I can't do it, or there's too many different specialty. In the end, I was doing always the same things. It was generally like videos, corporate videos.
Hmm.
So it was a bit of modeling, rigging, animation, lighting, shading, like the fundamentals. I wasn't doing any scripting for customers, any super advanced rigging, or like anything too specialized, or any project with like you absolutely need to know how. For example, I had a project I was about to cancel because they wanted a simulation, a liquid simulation, and that's not my thing. I hate
Right.
doing simulations. And I went, oh shit, I need to find someone to do it. So I took that path,
Yeah.
and it wasn't the right choice. So I just found a way. I used stock photo that I mixed up. I found a trick
Yeah.
to get to the result.
Amazing.
So that was one of the project where I felt this limitation basically.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just stick to things I feel like I can achieve, but always with a little challenge.
Nice.
Yeah, and
That's
the
really cool. Like, I think that's actually super, super important, mainly because I think that as professionals, especially when you specialize on something, there's always a point in your career that you become complacent. You know how to do something incredibly
yeah
well. You're getting paid incredibly well for what you do know how to do incredibly well. What why should I actually learn something new? And I think this is the pitfall and the problem, I think, with specializing in one thing. Because if you don't actually get yourself off balance, and like Pierrick was saying, like doing something but with always with a little challenge on top to make sure that you're always learning something new, I think things become boring. No matter how much you love animation,
yeah
but if you do animation 8 hours a day, 7 days a week, or 5 days a week, depending if you have a side project or not, and you actually are doing it for 10 years straight, it becomes boring. No matter how much money they pay you, money is no longer a issue when you go above a certain number. It's always about the art and satisfaction and curiosity and making sure that you're always learning something new. So I think that being a 3D generalist is perfect for that, because you're always, because the technology is changing, Blender is changing. What is the
yeah
new
yeah
features?
yeah
What
yeah
can I play with? Right? I guess that you're always thinking about that.
yeah. That's always interesting. Now I'm kind of lost, with all like the procedural things with geometry nodes and stuff like that.
Mm.
But there's so much to learn for me again. Now I do enjoy the path of being a specialist,
Mm.
like trying to be a better rigger and a better game animator, basically.
Nice.
That's really something I want to grind and be better at it. So
Uh,
now rigging, I do believe that I'm kind of not too bad. So the next step is to learn scripting because I need to automate whatever I do,
mhm.
and I'd love to be able to create my own automated rigging system, basically. To be
Nice.
able to generate my own rigs, but without redoing the rigs from scratch each time.
That will be
Uh,
amazing. That will be amazing.
yeah,
The Pierrick automated system.
Yeah, the feature design rig things. I will
Love it.
find a nice marketing way
Of course,
to.
of course.
Sure. And it's just honestly, I don't have a need professionally to learn that. It's just I want to do that,
Yeah.
and that's one of the reason why I'm still working with clients or studios. It's because I want to I want to be in the industry and see what it takes basically, and I
Yeah.
want to stick to it.
Yeah.
And that's one of the main critique people have about education, um, is that teacher, that's their job.
Mm.
They are not in the industry, so they teach you
Yeah.
relevant things, but they are not in production anymore. And I do believe part of my success as a teacher was that I'm focusing on production stuff.
Yeah.
I'm I'm not doing like I don't know not fancy tutorial, but like satisfying tutorial. I don't care. I don't take pleasure making those tutorials.
Yeah,
I just want to teach like real tricks.
of
I
course.
do that because this is what you have to do if you want to work on a professional
Yeah, yeah,
piece,
yeah. Stuff that
basically.
actually is useful, right?
Yeah.
And professional.
And
Yeah.
and when I published the first rigging course, it's where I appeared on the radar of many game studios, basically,
Hmm.
because that was the first. It was a demanding content for sure, but I do believe that I appeared as being knowledgeable in rigging or in Blender,
Of course.
basically, and a lot of people were like, "Oh, that's interesting." And this is where I got feedback from professionals that were taking my courses,
Hmm.
and this is where like my network really started to spread like super fast, and
Yeah, yeah,
it
yeah.
was
You know,
amazing.
and it shows even nowadays when you search for Blender courses, I can always see your name show popping up, which is amazing. Because then
That's
it makes
cool.
you a specialist of that thing, right? Which is great because then you have a name for yourself. But we have to talk about games because after
Yeah,
all, this is what I like to actually talk about with
yeah.
everybody. And, most of the people that come over here are from the games industry. So I know that you are huge into games and you are huge into playing games. And this is why you're now working as an animation director in games. So obviously you actually are a 3D generalist, or now you're becoming more specialized. But I guess the need or the want to become more specialized is because you want to kind of like be part of the industry more, right? So as you actually going down that path of specialization and going into games, how do you see your future? Do you see your future as being publishing a game, being part of a AAA game, or maybe working for Blizzard full time one day just to see how it is, and then be like, nope, I don't
Who
want to do
knows?
that. So, like, is that where you see yourself, or how do you see yourself in the games industry as Pierrick, right? How do you see yourself fitting in the games industry?
Oh, that's a tough one. I'd really like to kind of shine as being an animator and a rigger,
Hmm.
but I do also enjoy directing, not as directing in the way where you push people to make them do their best.
Hmm.
I don't know if I will be a good animation director or whatever, but what was very satisfying and also frustrating with Atypic Studio is that in the end I was managing the artistic team,
Yep.
and I would push them. I do believe in the right direction, and I would push them to improve themselves and make sure that they will take pleasure doing it, basically, because
Mm.
I think that's super important. And from the feedback I had and I still have, I I think it was a success.
Hmm.
So I'd love to be able to do that in a bigger studio.
Hmm.
Now working for Amazon Games on this project, it's a great opportunity, I guess. I'm enjoying the ride as long as it stays something where I can, I don't know, talk to people. As you don't feel like a very small grain of
Mm.
sand in a big machine, I think I will be comfortable with that. And I'd love to pin a triple A game to my resume.
Yeah.
That for sure, that's for sure. But now I don't foresee myself quitting P2 design or stopping educating people or doing that stuff.
Hmm.
I was at the Blender conference 10 days ago. It was amazing. It's my third one, and it's the second one where I don't attend that much talk.
Hmm.
I've been talking to people during the whole conference, and I'm trying to get involved into spreading Blender, basically.
Nice.
Um so those are the things that where I see me. I'd like to help the Blender community
Yeah.
and the Blender Foundation developing Blender.
Hmm.
So I help them. Like that's very small. I just attend some meetings, make some suggestion about the rigging and animation system.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's something I do enjoy, and that's why also I'd love to bring it to a big studio like Amazon. I don't know
Yeah.
if they will. For the time being, some people are using it, But if I was able to push more animators, there are very talented animators. There are very seasoned animators there,
Yeah.
and I'm sure that they are curious about Blender. And I do believe that we are in the stage where I could maybe make them animate some characters, or we could maybe build something around Blender that will be like just fantastic. Being able to
Exactly. Like
to do that,
I'm
that's
actually I'm foreseeing something, and I think that maybe it's gonna be you, Pierrick, that's gonna do it. But for the longest, but for the longest time, I like how GDC there's always the different studios talking about how we built our game, and there's always a studio or two that actually built the game with a different tool, something different, and like nobody believed in this tool, but this tool is great for these things. And then when you see the final result and you see how people play it, and it's like, turns out this environments are amazing or this animation system is better because of it. So all of a sudden everybody jumps on that tool and is like, oh yeah, no, turns out this is the thing. I've been waiting for the year that some studio comes along and be like, we did this whole thing in Blender and it's a AAA game from a big AAA studio and you also can do it in this way. And I foresee a day that maybe you're going to jump on at GDC and do that, right?
oh yeah, oh yeah.
That would be amazing.
Yeah, GDC. I mean, that's the next big step for me. I love.
Yeah, it's great.
No, but
Great
yeah,
place.
yeah. I think, well, people always say, yeah, but there are pipelines and stuff. Yeah, in very big studio, that's the case. But in smaller studio, again, like 40 to 50 people's, yeah, Blender is absolutely suitable. It depends on what you're doing.
Mhm.
If you, I believe that, and I'm absolutely not a specialist of motion capture, but I do believe that for motion capture, Blender is absolutely not ready.
Okay.
There's no tool as efficient as Motion Builder or whatever Maya can offer
Yeah.
that fits into Blender. That's
Right.
too early on. But for most indie game size studio, Blender is able to do a lot of things.
Nice.
Not every studios are doing Assassin's Creed. Don't
Absolutely. Yeah.
that's something people think that you absolutely need to be able to achieve this level of technology or this level of character animation polish to be relevant, but that's absolutely not the case. There are
Yeah. Yeah. Like I think what happens in the industry is that like, and I only know this because I've been around for a few years, is that whenever there's a tool, a new tool, right, that comes across and is like, let's use this, it needs to be tested and tried for many, many years in
yeah,
order for people to know that this is actually good. But then if it happens in an indie environment, people go like, yeah, but that was indie. So, it doesn't
yeah,
count. So in order for that tool to be greenlit for the whole industry to be used, is like this big title that it took 7 years to
yeah,
build that use this tool, then we good. Because I remember perfectly that the transition when I started, 3D Max was the 3D tool for the games industry. Nobody was using Maya, but the film industry was using Maya, VFX was using Maya, and everybody went, why can we not use Maya in games when everybody else in films is using it? That's because it's films. That's because it's VFX. Maya doesn't work for games. It's only 3D Max for these reasons. And it was mostly because of modeling. Max is great at modeling and all this stuff. But for animation, is not so good, unfortunately. So but animators had to kind of like be tagged along because it's great. Eventually started changing because some games started coming out with Maya pipelines, and then they started going like Guerrilla Games, for example, and they started
mm,
showcasing how you can actually expand them on your pipeline with your own tools with Maya. And then studios started seeing that and be like, wow, we can do all these things with Maya. We want that as well. So I think for me at least, I think once Blender goes through that bridge, and I think somebody will do it for sure, I have no
yeah,
doubt.
yeah.
Once Blender go through that bridge, I think is going to be absolutely great.
The thing is that so we had this conversation before.
Mm.
It's a very young industry,
Yeah.
and Blender started to develop LTS version like a few years ago, maybe 3 years ago. That's
Mm.
nothing, compared to, we know that generally a production took 4 to 5 years. So those are the cycles.
Mm.
So now Blender is like, we may have a solution. So let's talk about this in 5 years, maybe.
Yeah.
And when you see, and I'm not talking about CG or the game industry or whatever, all the industries that's really, oh, I won't find the word in English, like create new tools or innovate.
Hmm.
Okay, generally those are very small companies,
Yeah.
and then they get acquired by biggest companies
Hmm.
because those guys, they can take a step back because there's not like 1,000 people using Maya. That cost a
Exactly.
lot of money, and if we change now, those 1,000 people won't be able to produce anything for 3 months,
Yeah.
and that will cost like $10 million. How do you deal with that?
Absolutely. Yeah.
When you're a small company, you're like, okay, guys, we won't be paid this month. Let's grind Blender and see if we can do something with that, and we will save $1,000 a month
Yeah.
thanks to that. You can take this kind of decision. So once a smaller studio, it's like, I don't know if you've seen a movie called Generation Next on Netflix. A girl with purple hair and a robot, flying robot. Like he looks like Eve in Wall-E.
It rings a bell. I might have seen the trailer, maybe.
It was Tangent Studio. I think the studio closed, unfortunately, for
Okay.
other reasons, but they did the movie with Blender.
Nice.
It's not a Pixar quality, but honestly, it's a very. I am only talking about animation like rendering and stuff like that, not
Mhm.
about the movie itself. It's comparable to whatever production you would see on Netflix or in
Amazing.
theater. And so when they released that movie, it was one of the first like kick in the nest or whatever you will call it. Like, hey, Blender can do that, so maybe we can discuss now.
See, it's great.
And it was around Blender 2.8, I think, and 2.9. And this is more or less where when Blender started to really become super popular.
Okay.
Before it was like software for hobbyists, nobody was taken seriously
I
using Blender.
remember. Yeah.
Yeah, and now it's like, oh, okay, now you can do that in Mail. Yeah, you can do everything.
It takes time.
And as you know,
Yeah.
it's just a tool. So
Yeah.
I know that if I'm forced to use Maya to stick to that job, and if I enjoy the job, I will learn Maya. I don't care.
Well, it
I
happens
want to
with it.
be a good in. Yeah,
Exactly. Like it's just a piece of software, right? Like
yeah,
it doesn't really matter how we use it. It's just like at least for games is the fear, like to me at least, just seeing it from the other side is like the fear of change first, right? Like if you know a tool is test and tried and you are in a studio that is creating Call of Duty or Battlefield and you're doing it every year or every 3 years or every five
yeah. That's
years,
crazy,
like
crazy.
the pipelines are normally established already
Yeah,
like to a T, right? So if anything big changes, then what is the implications and the ramifications of this whole
yeah,
thing? And it becomes really complicated. So it needs to be one of those studios eventually will actually kind of like be able to do these things. Like well, I think once Blender has mocap and you can do mocap like motion builder or close to motion builder. Like
yeah,
Maya is not as good as motion builder at motion capture, but it's not bad either. Depends on the tools that you use. But if Blender can get close, great. Same thing with Unreal and right, like exporting animations to Unreal and
yeah,
FBXs and OBJs and things like that. Getting those things, that synergy to work really well will be amazing as well. I think once as soon as we get there, I think it's going to be great. Like no joke, Autodesk, as much as I love Autodesk and people on Autodesk are absolutely amazing, they ignored the games industry for a long time. They were always focused on film and VFX all
yeah,
the time. And for the longest time, we always asked for game tools, right? Can you integrate better with Unreal? Can we have exporters? Can we have, I don't know, a live previewer? Things like that. And only for the last maybe 5 years, I want to say, is that we're starting to get these things, mainly because Epic is so big nowadays and
yeah,
people are using Unreal for film and all these other things. All of a sudden, there's a connection there for those two softwares. But having said all those things, I think Blender will eventually be a massive piece of software for everybody because it's not just one company making differences or changes to the software. It's basically a whole community of amazingly
yeah, yeah.
smart people like yourself, kind of like chipping in and making sure that they actually kind of like make things better for the user, right? They're thinking about the user, not the profit, but
And,
the user.
and the thing is that if you look at the people investing in Blender and in the Blender found, you will find big companies like Nvidia, Intel, Epic,
See,
and
amazing.
Epic. I do believe that they have like a couple of three people. that are working specifically on Blender to Unreal Engine pipelines tools.
I see. So that's coming.
So
Maybe.
they talked about it like a little more than a year ago in an official Unreal presentation. I don't know if it's still a thing, but still, Epic is one of the biggest, I
Supporters.
don't know, yeah, supporters
Yeah.
of the Blender Foundation.
That's amazing.
So they are not doing it because they like the Blender community. It's also because they want to create a pipeline, and
Yeah.
they also switch to some kind of um, free freeware way of
Yeah.
spreading Unreal, because being a free tool doesn't mean that you won't get a lot of money out of it.
No, it's actually
It's
beneficial.
Yeah,
Yeah. It's
a lot more
absolutely.
people are using it and are
Yeah.
willing to support it.
Absolutely.
I do pay for Blender.
Yeah.
I donate for Blender more than I do for Adobe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's like, I'm making a living out of it. So it's like natural, and you want to, you know, and since you're not forced to pay for it, whenever there's a bug or there's something that goes wrong, you're not like, oh shit, I paid like, I
That
don't know,
is true.
whatever money for this and it doesn't work. It's not the same
Exactly.
mindset.
Yeah.
And yeah, that there's something really special about Blender and the community.
Yeah.
It looks like we're, praying in the church of Blender or
No,
whatever.
no, 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 at all. Not.
But, but no, no, but I'm kidding.
Yeah.
But since it's free, um, yeah, and I talked a lot again at the Blender conference with people from the studio and stuff, and you're pushed to share. You want to share what you do
Mm-hmm.
when you're in Blender, not in the way that you want to share it as a marketing strategy or whatever. You want
Yeah.
to explain people how you did it and share the knowledge, because this
Yeah.
is how Blender is developed,
Yeah.
and you're naturally pushed toward this, and that's amazing. It's
No, I understand that completely because, like, I remember the very first time that I saw Blender, and it was like I want to say like 2005, nine. I don't know. It was they came out with this short called Big Bad Bunny or Big
Yeah,
Bunny.
yeah, yeah,
You
yeah,
remember
yeah.
that?
Big Bug Bunny. Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So that was the first. So Blender came out before then, but then that was the first time that people were like, "Oh, wait a second! They made all
Yeah,
that in this software that is free, that is made by people that and animations were great. The rendering is amazing and all that stuff. And people started paying attention to Blender at that point. And to me, just the idea of having a piece of software that you can actually do, because this is me just starting in the industry, becoming a professional, and being able to afford a Maya license, right? Before
yeah,
then, I couldn't. So you just have to actually do dodgy things to actually kind of like use Maya. But you love the software, but you cannot afford it, no matter how much you push, because you have to pay rent, you have bills to pay, and it's absolutely impossible. So having a piece of software that is free and is actually a community-based software that is improved by the community and the feedback and what works and what doesn't work and all that stuff, even to me that I never used it. Well, I used it a few times. I dabbled in it a little bit. I saw the appeal. I was like, I want to be part of this because, like,
yeah, yeah.
all of a
It's
sudden,
awesome.
you also feel, correct me if I'm wrong, but you must feel very much like you are heard much more than if you are working with an Photoshop. That you can never say anything to Adobe to improve Photoshop. I mean, who does that, right? Nobody. You just use it and that's it. But I'm pretty sure
Yeah,
being part of the Blender community, you can actually go ahead and be like, wouldn't it be nice to have these things? Let me suggest it. Let's see what happens.
the thing is that if you make cool things with Blender, there's a lot of chances that they will reach out to you
Oh, I
just to say
see.
thank you.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it happens to me like a couple of years ago,
Yeah.
that Francesco Cidi, the CTO, just sent me an email just
Mm,
saying thank you for what you're doing. Like, and I was,
amazing.
wow, that's so cool.
Wow.
And I'm kind of popular, but I'm not like super popular in the Blender community. There are people with way bigger channels and stuff like that. But I did a piece of animation or whatever that stand out at this point,
Hmm.
and they reach out to me to say thanks for that and for all the tutorials and stuff, and spreading the Blender things. And the thing is that since it's open source, you have a lot of clever people in the world, like,
Hmm.
that are like maybe too shy to say to the Blender Foundation or the Blender development team, oh, maybe you should try this.
Right.
But they are clever enough to test it by themselves.
Mm.
And then it works. And then they will try it. And then someone will, stumble upon this, test it, and will be less shy and say, hey, guy, have you seen that?
Right.
So, for example, they are really working hard to improve the animation system, and they are doing a great job about this. This is why, when we were talking about Maya,
Mm-hmm.
Blender doesn't have a very reliable layer system,
Mm-hmm.
but they are working on it, and in 1 year, 2 year maximum, this is going to be a thing. But a guy did developed a layer system for Blender, basically.
I see.
And so now he's part of the board,
That's
helping to
cool.
develop it. Yeah, that's so cool.
That is cool.
Or the animate add-on, which allows you. So it's like I I don't know the software, but people talk about it. But I think it's like Twin Machine for Maya,
Oh, I
something like
see. Like a
that.
plugin that allows you to do in betweens.
Yeah,
Yeah.
manipulate curves like
Yeah. Yeah.
in many ways. So he had this add-on, and he was totally up to share his code with the developers, and
Right.
now what he did for the add-on is being implemented as being a core thing of Blender.
Of Blender. That's
So
great.
yeah, that's really a cool thing about it. And I used to have this mentality of proper. I won't be able to say it, but whatever. What you develop is yours,
Yeah.
basically, and you may not want to share it with other. You should be like in marketing competition. And there's one guy that really opened my eyes because I was working very hard to stay polite on the animation course,
Mm-hmm.
and someone released an animation course like a couple of weeks before me, and I was all so
Oh
sorry, guy,
no.
And he told me, but that's fine.
Mm.
His success will be your success,
Mm.
because if he's successful, more people will want to learn animation, and they will look and search for animation content,
True.
and they will stumble on your products. And so it really, this little conversation, it's Wayne Dixon, by the way. It was amazing. It was just a couple of lines, and I
That's
was, oh
great.
yeah, that's so
Really cool. Yeah, and
such a
so
cool one.
like even people in the community themselves actually are just like super friendly. So yeah,
Yeah,
this chat is definitely giving me a like a new appreciation for Blender.
come on,
I heard
come to Blender.
I always heard great things, so I cannot wait to try it because we had here a few people that actually have used Blender, are really good at using Blender. So having you here is really awesome. So yeah, we have many more questions, by the way. I don't know if we're actually going to get
Go
to all
ahead,
of
go,
them,
go, yeah,
but
go ahead.
Mate he's kind of making fun of my bottle because he's absolutely massive. He said it's a small bottle. Yes, it's a small bottle. Keep yourselves hydrated. So here's a question from Petter. What do you think about Unreal being used as an animation tool for games? Do you foresee Unreal becoming more mainstream than Blender? I'll
Huh.
let you answer that first because that's a really good question.
So I'm not yet experienced enough with Unreal Engine, but it's definitely on my list
Okay.
of things to learn. I started to test it a couple of years ago. Having in-engine animation tools is definitely and is going to be like a big thing for sure.
Agree.
I don't know if, as not being a software to make animation specifically, it's
Mhm.
going to be versatile enough and comfortable enough yet. But for sure, that's super important, um, especially if you are able to rig your character as what you have in Blender, for example, in Unreal, and be able to tweak your animation in Unreal, because a lot of the time, animation for games, it's like you have 90% of the job done in your DCC, and then you're tweaking stuff and going back and forth.
Yep.
And sometimes it's just rotating one bone, like the hips. Okay, it's jumping forward. Let's just blend it like that.
Yeah.
If you can do it like quicker and be if you can tweak your animation faster directly in engine, that's going to be for sure a game changer.
Mhm.
I think that's going to be also a game changer to solve simple things like inverse kinematics in real time and stuff like that. That's super techy. I mean, I'm not again
It is very thick.
super experienced, but
Yeah.
that's complicated.
Yeah.
Like for us in Blender, it's like, two shortcuts and you have
Yeah.
an inverse kinematics. But in engine, that's complicated because an engine is not supposed to make this kind of
Yeah.
calculation.
Hmm.
It's supposed to use the GPU, not the CPU.
That's it.
And you can't run like 5 rigs at once in Blender. It will be super slow. While in Unreal Engine, there are games where you have 100 characters at the
Oh
same
yeah.
time, and
No
it's
problem.
60 FPS, no problem,
Yeah.
because it doesn't compute animation the same way. So I guess the technology will, and yeah, the technology will come close to that, and I'm really looking forward to this. I'd love to animate directly in Engine. That will
Yeah.
be awesome for sure.
Agree, agree. Yeah, and also like obviously we can talk about this for days for me because this is the brand new, the brand new thing coming up. But I like so yeah, as Pierrick mentioned, like the problem when you are a gameplay animator is that you spend half of your time in Maya and the other half in Engine, and a lot of the time you spend more time in Engine than you spend in Maya, mainly because you need to kind of like tweak and find out how animations work and how they blend and all these other things. And I think what Epic is trying to do, which is actually what we all want to do, like a designer or engineer spends pretty much all of their time within Engine. They are either coding things in Engine and they're seeing Engine and code side by side, or a designer is kind of tweaking numbers in Engine and it's amazing. So that you have to spend all the time in the tool that you actually are going to deliver the end product. And Peric would know this better than I do, but if you're making a film or short or VFX, you do it in the one piece of software. Maybe you use ZBrush and then come back and then finish the whole thing, or maybe you use Photoshop and then come back and finish the whole thing. But at some point, you need to focus on the software that you're going to deliver the main thing, right?
Yeah.
And in games at the moment, if you're not an animator, that never really happens. You have always to kind of go between the two things, and it's a massive pain. And engines are naturally better at like doing things in real time. And Maya just recently got better at like rendering animations in real time. You had to play blast a bunch back in the day. So it makes sense for you to be able to animate an engine for so many reasons. But the problem is exactly what Behik mentioned, which is like the limitations that exists in Unreal that Maya has. Like there's lots of things that Maya has that Unreal doesn't have. If Blender is only now starting to get the grips with animation and the graph editor and all this stuff, and it's been years and years and years in the making, I envision that Epic most likely going to have to go through the same situation.
Yeah.
It's going to be years in the making until they actually can get a graph editor that is as good as Maya, or you be able to tweak things and feel as natural and go from key to key or pose to pose or straight ahead. There's different ways to animate. Every animator has a different way of animating. So you need to cater to all these people and more and be able to actually do it in a really, really good way. So Epic has a big uphill battle to go, but I do think they are have the most intelligent people in the world working for them.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So they'll probably take
Yeah,
half of the
they're
time
not too
than
bad.
anybody else to actually
Yeah,
get there. They will do it fast, but I still think that we a few years away from actually getting there. I don't think we
yeah,
are
yeah,
quite there yet.
yeah. I think we'll see, as I say, like changes where you can tweak your animation with ease directly in engine,
Mm.
but making a whole animation in engine,
Yeah,
that's going will still be complicated. Plus, you have to think about the UI and stuff like that when you open a game engine. That there's a lot of things on screen. It's also the case for Blender, but it's not as messy
it's
as a game
much
engine,
more.
basically.
It's much
So
more. Yeah.
it's I'm not sure that will be necessarily a good move to like push animation too far.
Mm.
But if you can bring like inverse kinematics for any chain and be able like to tweak those animation again and read them or retarget them like with more ease, that's gonna be like, yeah, a game changer for sure. So
Exactly, exactly. Also, another thing that actually should be mentioned is like time. Time is different in engine. Is like there's like in animation in Maya or Blender, we deal with seconds most of the time. We'll deal with like just minutes, and this is all you have to worry about. In engine, there's a thing called ticks, and it's basically like a measurement of time that is basically based on the engine and how it takes, based on the server, based on the client, based on a bunch of technical things. And what all this means is that things are interpolating all the time,
Yeah,
which actually, if you actually want to make animations in twos, like into the Spider Verse, so if you actually want to do something more stylized, it becomes very complicated.
yeah,
Unreal is made for mocap and realistic animation for the most part, so that's another frontier that needs to eventually get to. You can fake it, you can engineer your way around it. A lot of games have made it, but it's not native, and it needs to be native. So
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. That, I had this conversation recently.
Exactly.
How can we get that? I don't know.
I don't know. I tell you a game that did it incredibly well because they are, once again, they are geniuses. Sony Santa Monica, as the Spider-Man game they have. At some point, we actually had the animator that one of the animators that worked in the Spider-Man games, which is now an animation director, by the way, for the second one, which is great. He was here. And one of the questions that I had for him is that when you actually put the suit from Into the Spider Verse, the animations look all that are in twos. No matter what you do, you go from smooth animation, 60 frames per second or whatever, 120 frames, incredibly smooth, to then all of a sudden having this interpolation that actually looks like you actually, but it still feels natural, but it just feels more cartoony all of a sudden. And I thought it was fully animation. They had to tweak the animations, but it was all engineering. Turns out
Yeah,
it was all engineering and things solving differently in engine, behind the scenes, same animations, but which makes sense because you already have the assets for the
yeah.
animations.
Maybe
So
maybe filters, to ignore,
exactly,
like you were talking about a time thing. Maybe convert that in seconds of frame and just hold that
just
pose.
hold the poses and in
Hold
between.
those curve, flat those curve. Yeah,
Exactly. And this is exactly why it's going to be so great to animate in engine because you can do
yeah.
these things. You can
Oh
like,
yeah,
you can, the world is your oyster, but, and this is what I'm so excited about it. I cannot wait for that time. Hopefully it
yeah,
happens within my time and it's not my kids because
yeah,
I'll have stories. I'll be like, I wish I had this back in the day,
yeah,
but we shall see. We shall see.
yeah.
Um, so one more question. We have Asas Kun asks, what can I do when I want to learn and practice to become an animator, but my computer is not enough for that? It's actually not really bad, but just can I can practice around 30 minutes before my computer, I guess, crashes. It's off. I think you need to get a new computer.
Yeah,
Asas
I
Kun.
think that will be a first step. Or
Yeah.
you can steal one. I didn't say
Don't say it out
that.
loud. Um,
um,
Yeah, like having computers crashing on you is the worst thing in animation. When you're halfway through an
yeah.
animation and you made a lot of progress and then the file is corrupt.
So I think that's one of the big relief for the few people I train on Blender is that Blender crashes like almost never.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and they were like, "Oh, that's so comfortable." All the tool they wouldn't find or whatever that were like wiped away
Wow.
by the fact that it wasn't crashing at all.
Witchcraft. What is Blender doing
Yeah,
better than everybody
I don't
else?
know. I, the thing is that to really put that between parentheses, that since Blender is open source, the code is super light.
Mm.
And one guy explained me, I don't remember if it was at the Blender conference a few years ago or whatever, is that often enough, proprietary software get very complex because they are adding layers of complexity on top of it,
Oh
so that
yeah.
people can't break the code.
Oh, I
It's
see.
like a protection,
Like a
but
protection. Yeah, makes
the
sense.
goal is to make Blender as readable as possible to anyone that wants to modify it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I guess it's one of the reasons why it runs smoothly and it's so light.
Mm.
I don't know how much it is now, maybe 300 megabytes, but that's still
That's amazing.
pretty. Yeah, that's not that much.
Yeah.
So to answer the question, you should train with like super low poly characters, and that's way enough, I guess, like a mannequin or whatever. If you want to learn animation for movies or acting, it's a little, yeah, that's a problem for sure.
Hmm.
But if it's for games or if you're really starting learning animation, body mechanics and pantomime is so important. You don't need a fancy character. The simplest it is, and the more you're focusing on making this look alive, the
Yeah.
better at animation you will be. So you can use my free mannequin rig that will run on any engine.
Absolutely, you should. Like, actually, to add to that, there's a thing that a lot of animators use called a proxy, and a lot of rigs have that, which means that you
Yeah,
can actually like it's almost like what we call in games LOD levels.
yeah,
So you can basically like make like a character sometimes actually has like broken geometry, so there's gaps in between and all that stuff. Maybe try that if you can to make sure that the rig is as light as possible. What you can do as well, like we had an animator here called Mark Masters that animates with basically a cube on the cog, which is the
oh
hips,
yeah, that's
right?
crazy. His
So
method, yeah,
exactly. So you don't actually, you basically just copy the animation to a cube, and then you just hide your rig, and then you animate the cube, and then you paste the animation back into the character. Things like that, I think, will allow you to see the character or the rig less on screen, which will hopefully make your scene much lighter overall. And then use something like Animbot if you're using Maya to make sure that he's auto saving your stuff all the time, or at least get the Maya settings to autosave your scene every 10 minutes or so, because yeah, there's nothing worse than a scene crashing and then you're losing all the progress that you've
yeah,
had for the last 2 days and you never saved once and then it's gone.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
horrible.
That's terrible, I
It's
guess.
horrible. Oh, last tip. Save your files as .ma instead of .mb if you use Maya, because .ma files, you can actually open them in the script editor and actually fix the file on the text editor itself. .mb are basically cursed files by the devil that should never be used by anybody. So don't use it. Use .ma all the time. .ma gives you the hope that you might be able to fix it.
It's not an Halloween trick. That's
No,
for sure. It's cursed by the devil. Okay.
.mb is basically like a very old school file format that Maya used to have that is now outdated. But .ma came along just to save the day because everybody was complaining, my file is crashed and is corrupted and there's nothing I can do about it. So then eventually .ma came along. It's like, now you can open it and read the text and see if you can
Yeah,
find
that's
anything that
cool.
you can tweak, which is great. Yeah.
Cool, cool.
Awesome. Anyways, I think we've been here for nearly 2 hours.
Yeah, yeah.
Pierrick.
I'm really talkative.
No. It's been an absolute pleasure. I didn't even felt it, which is amazing. So
Yeah,
yeah,
that's cool.
so well, we'll wrap it up because I don't want to take too much of your time, Pierrick. But it's been an absolute pleasure to have you here, and thank you so much to everybody in the chat for being so nice. All the Blender community kind of rallied around this chat. I feel everybody's kind of like throwing great comments about Blender and Pierrick and the course. And if you are new here or new to Perique's course or new to Perique's world, you should absolutely go and check it out. For like if you're actually into Blender, if you're curious about Blender or anything like that, start with Perique's course because he's a whiz at teaching things. He's really,
Yeah.
really good.
Thank you so much, man.
No problem.
I,
No
I
problem.
I loved it. I wish like we had like all the night to talk, but you can see like on my face that I really need to get to bed. So,
Exactly. Exactly. No problem, Pierrick. But yeah, thank you so much, man. And yeah, thanks for everything you do for the
thank you.
community. And let's keep talking. We need to do this more often.
Yeah, 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 yeah. I'd love to.
Yeah.
See you, man. Thank
Okay,
you so
see ya.
much.
Chat,
See
thank
you.
you very
Bye.
much. Speak to you guys later. Bye bye.